Alright, so I'm in the shop here, just getting ready to go home. It is Sunday. I really don't have anything that was really interesting today to film that I felt like sharing. I did work all day. I've actually tweaked my back yesterday, but I'm standing here in front of the 7410, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. And then I'm going to talk about another subject that is near and dear to my heart because it's happened to me, and I say near and dear to my heart, but it's a concern for everyone involved in this industry. But okay, so yesterday, I'm not going to walk under the loader today because I got a lot of flack for that, you know. So, anyways, yesterday I changed this tire. I try to keep, for some reason, this right tire wears out faster than the left tire. And this tire is the tire off of the left-hand side from the last tire change cycle. So me and Joe and Grant changed his tire. Timothy wasn't here yesterday. He was delivering a load of hay. The tire's pretty well bald, but it'll work until they're both bald. And that'll probably happen next fall when they're just completely shot and I have to replace them again. So I did a video a couple weeks ago, or few days ago, maybe a week ago, where I had changed the bushings or the shims in these things. And this side I'm going to walk under there. This side had the bearings out of it, and I replaced the bearings. Well, when you replace the bearings, you got to replace the races. And I was going to replace the races. I popped them out. You watched me torch it. I remember somebody commenting about the hot grease dripping down on fire. Where were my safety glasses? That whole thing. Well, I had company in between the time I did the upper race and the lower race. And you guessed it, I had problems with this wheel. I just could not get it to straighten up. I bought shims, I replaced shims, I added shims. I just couldn't get this damn wheel to be perfectly straight. So I ended up taking it apart yesterday. A couple days ago I took it apart, maybe on Thursday. Friday. Me and Joseph did it on Friday. Or was it yesterday? I think it was yesterday. Well, whatever, it doesn't even matter. Took it apart, put more shims in there, replaced some stuff, put it back on. Yesterday, Dad took it out and used the tractor. It comes back in and the damn wheel is cocked off to the side. So obviously, if you look there in that puddle of oil from the hydraulic cylinder, that is the remains of a bearing. So I popped the kingpin back out, which holds the bearing, and it looks like that. And then today, we put it in. I put the new bearing in. I felt around in there, and I thought it felt a little strange, but I put the bearing in, put the shims in, put it all back together again, turned the wheel right, turned the wheel left, and the wheel goes clunk like this. I'm like, what is going on? Well, if you remember a little earlier in the video, I said that someone came in to talk with me between the upper race and the lower race. Well, I put the upper race in and the seal, and then I put the lower seal in and forgot to put the stinking bearing race in there. So that's what happened. The bearing race wasn't right. It wasn't in there. I put the bearing in. Bearing would go up against the side of the housing, which explained why I had to put so many shims in there, why it was so loose and clunky, why it kept tearing it up. So anyways, I have the race. I put it in today, and I got it going. So that's what happened today. Checked the oil and everything, but now it's good. It actually is good. It's straight. I greased it with 338 Schaefer's 338 Moly grease. I actually even painted 338 on the gun so that you will see anytime you go to grab this gun, it's going to say 338 or 238, not 338, 238, 238. That is the grease that goes into the loaders and the bearings in the front end of the tractors. Okay, so now on to the other subject that is always kind of been a pet peeve of mine, I'd say. Pet peeve meaning farm safety. Farm safety, yes. I'm not trying to disrespect anybody or needle them or even downplay what happened, but I got an email yesterday, and it's bugged me ever since. It's bugged me. It just bugs me ever since. The email stated that the farming life, and you know, if you know anything about me and Eric Moser, the farming life, there is no love lost between us. I don't care for Eric. I don't care for his channel, but I do care when there's an accident. And an accident happened on his farm. I'm not exactly sure what happened. It's none of my business, and I don't watch his channel, but when somebody writes to me and says there was an accident, obviously I was curious and I wanted to see what had happened. Apparently his 4-year-old little girl had been hurt somehow, and it breaks my heart that it happened, because I think she's about 4 years old, at least by the looks of her in the video, that she's 4 years old. And as you know, I've raised 4 children so far, and I got number 5 here, Mr. William, who is 6 months old at this point. So I'm raising a 5th kid. Haley, Joe, Tim, Peyton were the first 4 that I raised. Peyton is not my biological son, but I helped raise him from the time he was 5 years old till, well, he's still a part of my life. So, and I love him and care for him very much, just like I do my other children. And now, of course, William. Well, when I was a kid, I wasn't allowed to do anything on tractors until I was at least 10 years old. Okay, and when I was 10 years old, I was allowed to run the little Ford 9N that I have that was my uncle's, and I raked hay with that thing, and I was always within the supervision or within ear or eye shot of my parents, grandparents, uncle, whoever. I was always never left alone to run that, and that was when I was 10 years old, and I didn't do much. You know, I was more to feed cattle or cows, calves, bottle feed, milk cows, and things like that. It wasn't until I was about 13 or 14 years old when I really started to drive tractors and stuff. Now, I'm not saying that this is what happened on the Farming Life channel or what happened to his daughter, but I've seen scores and scores of farming channels out there, a lot of small farming channels out there, and they have their kids 5, 6, 7 years old in a skid steer or on a tractor or in a lawnmower or on a motorcycle, 4-wheeler, quad, whatever you want to call them nowadays, operating this equipment. You know what? I don't tell people what to do with their kids. I chose when my older children were of the age where they would start driving tractors. Let's see. I bought the skid steer in 2011. Joseph and Peyton were both born in 2000, so they were 11 years old. They still didn't run the skid steer. Limited. The skid steer was, I bought it in 2011, so they were both 11 years old, and it was, that is probably the safest machine to be in, but for people around the machine, it's not safe. Accidents happen and things happen in the blink of an eye. I've seen scores of people with little kids running heavy equipment that is great for the kid because he's safe in there, but the people around him could be injured very easily. I don't know what happened on the Farming Life channel, but I know that there's a neighbor of mine that lives right across the road, and he had his son, who was 4 years old, riding around on a little motorcycle that he bought, and it'd go about 25 miles an hour, which is fast enough to kill your kid. And I was concerned. I was there to visit him, and I was concerned a little bit, and I was like, is that really the smartest thing to be doing with your kid? I mean, you only have one son at this point, and I had a daughter later. She was in the car. And, oh no, he's great, he never has any problems, he's doing really good. Well, how long has he been riding this thing? Well, about 2 days, oh my God. So anyways, a little boy comes around and he parks in front of us, and we were talking there, and the little motorcycle's running, and then all of a sudden, he dumps the clutch, and his feet go flying back, and his hand is on that throttle, and he slams into the side of his mom's car. 4 years old doing that stuff. He didn't get hurt too bad. Had a little bit of a bruise on his face. He was wearing a helmet. Probably could have been a whole lot worse. The motorcycle, stalled out, and the kid was fine. But this happens over and over and over again. We live in an industry, or we work within an industry that at the drop of a hat, things can happen and people get killed and hurt and everything like this. So I actually want to do a little bit of research on what happened on the Farming Life's channel. So I went to Lancaster County, Pennsylvania website and newsroom, and I typed in farm injuries, Lancaster, Pennsylvania. There were so many 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old deaths, injuries, maimed, loss of limbs, fathers charged with second-degree murder and things like this. And then there's like a lull. And I mean, we're not talking 1 or 2, but in the last 10 years there has been literally 50. I would say 50. Okay, so I'm getting a little long-winded and my battery just went dead, so I'm going to wrap it up here. What I saw in the Lancaster County alone was like between 20 and 50 different kids that were maimed, hurt, killed because their parents put them in a machine, or there was a child in a machine, or there was a kid doing a job that was outside of their skill set. We live on farms where things are very, very dangerous. Everything is dangerous. I mean, I got horseshoes hanging above my head every day. One of them could wiggle off someday and crack me in the head. But, you know, and that's just a freak accident. But when you put a child into a piece of equipment where there are other people around, or even by themselves, and they just don't have the knowledge or the know-how of the consequences of those pieces of equipment, things can go really bad really quickly. I've seen this over the years. I'm 46 years old, and like I said, I've raised 4 kids. Thankfully, none of my children were hurt too bad in anything that happened here, other than a couple of stitches. My nephew had broken bones. 2 nephews, 2 broken arms, a broken finger, you know, things like that, but not from equipment, just from being on the farm. But I never let my kids in the machines, running them alone when they were too young to understand what these machines can do. Joseph, I think we were talking about this today, because it bugs me that the Farming Life had this problem, this injury to their daughter, and it just bugs me. And it shouldn't bug me, but you know, it's a proud thing to say, hey, my kid is doing this. You know, as a parent, you're proud of your children when they do this stuff. But just because they can manage to do it doesn't mean that they should be doing it. And sometimes being a parent means saying, no, you're not old enough to operate that piece of equipment. And a few tears is fine to say no. A few tears like, oh, you know, because if it prevents a lot of tears later, you know, if you know what I'm talking about, then it was okay to make that, you know, allow that kid to cry a little bit, because they are too young to run big, heavy equipment. Now, when I was a child, the biggest tractor we had was a 4430, and I didn't get to start to drive that 4430 till I was 13, 14 years old. I ran the 4010 and the 4320 when I was probably 12 years old, taking the manure out. That's it, taking the manure out. Don't get off the tractor. If you get stuck, shut the tractor off, walk back to the farm, we'll get a bigger tractor, pull you out. That's how that worked. There were plenty of other things that I did on the farm that were, you know, borderline dangerous or too dangerous for a child to do, but we did them. But the equipment today is so much bigger, it's bigger, it's faster. Yes, there are safety things on those tractors and stuff, but still, the people around these pieces of equipment that a child is running are the ones that are in more danger than the child itself. And a kid, you know, you panic. A kid will panic. An adult will say, hey, whoa, I got to step on the clutch here, where a kid will be doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So anyway, maybe I'll post everything I just said today, or maybe not. But I will say that I'm sorry that the Farming Life's daughter got hurt. I don't know the details of it, and I am in no way implying that somebody on the farm did something to that little girl, or whether, you know, I mean, something happened, and it's fine that it happened, but, you know, it's not fine that it happened. I'm just saying that sometimes saying no to your kid could save their life or someone around them's life. You know, just because they can reach the throttle on the tractor or the skid steer and operate the controls doesn't mean that they're capable of operating the machine and that they could hurt somebody. So, you know, it's okay to be proud of your kids, but it's also good to say no. It's okay to say no. And hurting their feelings is a lot better than burying them because you didn't want to say no. But anyways, thanks for watching. Please comment, rate, and subscribe. And no, I am not digging at Eric.